Okay.
Good morning. Or good afternoon, I should say. We are so excited. We are so excited. We are so excited that you are joining for another amazing Tuesday at 1 p.m. Bible study. Oh, we have been having a blast during this new season of our Bible study. There are uh, uh, some themes that we are excited to highlight during this Bible study. We have been checking out three things in particular as we begin the start of 2023. The first thing that we have been exploring is living out our unique divine identity. The second thing we've been exploring is living out our unique divine mission and purpose. And the third thing that we've been exploring in this new 2023 Bible study series is what are those particular things we need to work on that can enhance our identity, mission, and purpose? And what are those things we need to work on that can hinder or get in the way of us living out our unique identity and purpose? And so we're so excited. We're so excited. We're so excited because there is an amazing author that we have been checking out. This sister is amazing, and there is an awesome book that we have been looking at. I hope you have pen and paper so that you can check out this book, write the title down, write the write the author's name down, because I'm telling you, she is amazing. And this book is awesome. If you shop on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, we want to let you know that you can definitely grab this book. The name of this book is entitled Set Boundaries, Find Peace, a guide to reclaiming yourself. You see the cover there, and the author is Dr. Nidra Glover Kewab. Dr. Nidra Glover Kewab. We want to invite you to follow her on social media. Simply Google Nidra's Nuggets. Nidra's Nuggets. And there is some wonderful, amazing lessons you would learn from her. And so we're in this book entitled Set Boundaries, Find Peace. I'm telling you, this is a book that you would love. And we've been talking about during this series what are the ways in which we need to set boundaries to achieve our divine, unique identity, and living into that identity. What are ways we need to set boundaries to achieve walking in the fullness of our mission and purpose? What are ways in which we need to maintain boundaries so that our identity, mission, and purpose won't be hindered, but instead enhanced? And so we looked at a couple of weeks ago friends and how we need to guard ourselves against particular friends and how we need to only surround ourselves with friends that respect our identity, respect the mission and purpose that God is calling us to live out. Today, we're going to talk about romantic relationships. We're going to delve into a particular biblical story that helps us to think about what are the ways in which who we are romantically connected to will either enhance or impede our mission and our purpose. How many people watched the Grammys? How many people watched the Grammys a couple of nights ago? Beyonce received a Grammy, and a lot of people were talking about a particular word she highlighted in one of her Grammy acceptance speeches. She immediately says, I want to thank my beautiful husband, Jay-Z. for the ways in which he is supporting me. And I begin to think, oh my gosh, first and foremost, that man is not beautiful. And I was talking to one of my friends, and one of my friends challenged me and said, you know what, Danielle? There's no such thing as an ugly billionaire. Beyonce understands the assignment. Oh, we just got to think it for a second. Wow, that's interesting. And my friends were saying, she understood, she understands the assignment. That it's not all about physical look and outward appearances. She understands this is my mission and purpose of what I'm trying to achieve in life. And if I am romantically connected to Jay-Z, that will help me get to the space and place of my particular goals in life. In some sense, that's a great example. That's a great example for us with this particular lesson. Dr. Dr. Nisha Awad is wanting to share with us today whatever our mission and purpose is, whatever our identity is, who we are romantically connected to will either help us or hinder us. Let's jump into a particular Bible story that highlights this a bit more. Let's look at Acts chapter 4, verses 32 to the end of that chapter into the next chapter, Acts chapter 5, all the way up to verse 11. I want to invite you, if you have a notebook or something to take notes, you can grab your notebook, and you can also see the words here on the screen. You can also see the words here on the screen for a moment. Let's check this out. We're looking at Acts chapter 4, beginning at verse 32. And this particular translation is from the New Revised Standard Version. This particular translation is from the New Revised Standard Version. Now, the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possession, but everything they owned was held in common. With great power, the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. And there was a Levite, a native of Cyprus, Joseph, to whom the apostles gave the name Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. He sold a field that belonged to him, then brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. But a man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife, Sapphira, sold a piece of property, and with his wife's knowledge, he kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. Ananias, Peter asked, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? And after it was sold, were not the proceeds at your disposal? How is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You did not lie to us, but to God. Now, when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died, and great fear seized all who heard of it. The young men came and wrapped up his body, then carried him out and buried him. After an interval of about 2 hours, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter said to her, tell me whether you and your husband sold the land for such and such a price. She said, yes, that was the price. Then Peter said to her, that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test. Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Immediately, she fell down at his feet and died. And when the young men came in, they found her dead. So they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. And great fear seized the whole church and all who heard of these things. This is an interesting story, is it not? Oh my goodness. As I've always said, no need to turn into soap operas. The Bible, the Bible is filled with the greatest stories you could ever read of soap operas, of drama.
Wait.
This story is an interesting story, is it not? Let's give some historical background. You remember the story of Pentecost that occurred a few chapters earlier before Acts chapter 4. The birth of the church. The Christian church is created in Acts chapter 2. The story of Pentecost is a story that we're all familiar with. This is the birth of the church. Jesus has been crucified, suffered a horrific death that some would say is state sanctioned violence. And now the Holy Spirit now is born. The Holy Spirit comes to the disciples who are gathered in an upper room, and this Holy Spirit now births the new church. And now, after the Holy Spirit has come, the disciples, those remaining, are now gathered to discern, okay, what is the church called to be? What is the church called to do? More importantly, the disciples have something they have to grapple with. How do they now care for each other now? Because while they were with Jesus, Jesus was providing for them. Jesus was providing for them in terms of food, shelter, sustenance. But now Jesus, their beloved Savior, is gone, and now also their human provider is gone. So the disciples discern, as we create this new church, let us also create an anti-capitalistic way of being. The disciples discern, let us all pool our resources together. Let us first and foremost sell all of our material possessions and property, put all of the money together in one pot, and then equally distribute the money so that there is no one poor among us. Let us pause for a second. Wouldn't it be cool if we enacted a process like that today? In the 60s and 70s, a terrible, terrible rumor started called socialism that was deemed inappropriate and unethical. So we see in something, Acts chapter 4 is the first act of biblical socialism in some sense. We see it is an anti-capitalistic venture where, first and foremost, the disciples discerned early on that there would be no poor people among them. Everybody would have their needs met. But that meant that they would have to pool their resources together. This is also an African-centered way of life, of being, where, from an Afrocentric perspective, these apostles discerned nobody in the community should have to suffer because we could pool our resources together. I remember experiencing that as a child. When I was about 15 or 16 years old, my family was poor. We became homeless for a little while. We had to live with my grandmother. And one day, my grandmother decided, with the addition of me, my mom, my dad, and my brothers living with her, ends became a little tight. And one day, she was a little hard pressed to make a dinner. She looked at me and she said, hey, go down the road down a particular street, knock on these people's homes, and tell them to come over. We're going to have a joint dinner together. And I said, that's not possible. We can afford, afford to host people. We can't even figure out how we're going to feed everybody in our own house, let alone everybody else outside. Talking about. She said, no. You go down the street and ask Miss Johnson to bring her corn. She could afford a bag of corn. Then she said, go down the street and ask Mr. Smith to bring his ground beef. She said, then stop at this person's house and ask them to bring their green vegetables. So I did it, convenient to grandma. Lo and behold, all of these people came to our home. And you know what happened? My grandmother took all of those ingredients and made a big pot of stew. And it was enough to feed not only me, my mom, my dad, my brothers, but literally everybody on the block. Everybody on the block came over, and my grandmother poured a bowl of stew, and everybody's stomach was filled that night. That was my first experience of experiencing what does it mean when we all pool our limited resources together and bring them together and something body can get fed. This story of what Acts chapter 4 highlights is also what our beloved Jesus did one day in pulling resources together of a young boy who had 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread that once pulling those resources together, they were full. And so this text, first and foremost, helps us to see that the apostles are asking Ananias and his wife Sapphira to pull our resources together. But we see Ananias and Sapphira in Acts chapter 5, they don't want to do that. They decide to sell their home, but instead of bringing all of the proceeds that they retained from their house back to back to the apostles, they decide to pinch a little and keep some for themselves. Now, what does this have to do with our learning for today that needs to change what wants us to highlight? In some sense, one of the reflective questions that we have to grapple with is, first and foremost, how come this married couple didn't hold each other accountable? According to Acts chapter 5, the text says, but a man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. What's this, family? Let's hone in on chapter 5, verse 1. Chapter 5, verse 1. But a man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. And as verse 2 highlights, and with his wife's knowledge, he kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. One lesson that this text highlights for us is, are you romantically involved with someone who's going to hold you accountable? That's right. The question that we have to ask is, if it was in fact the case that Ananias wanted to hold back a portion of the proceeds from selling his property, why couldn't his wife hold him accountable and say, no, honey, this is not good. This was not the directive of the apostles that we were given. We should not do this. And at the same time, this chapter 5, verse 1 text highlights why couldn't, in some sense, Ananias also respond this way with his wife? Why couldn't he say, you know what? I was going to hold back a piece of the proceeds from the property, but I shouldn't do this, wife. Let's not do this. Let's make a different decision. Dr. Nisma K. Wab wants us to reflect on, how are we romantically involved with persons who do not want to hold us accountable? Think about whoever you are romantically involved with. Is it somebody who can hold you accountable? The second theme we want to highlight in this text is, unfortunately, Ananias dropped dead to his feet in front of the apostles, Peter in particular. And then the text highlights in verse 7 in particular, during an interval of about 3 hours, his wife comes in, not knowing what happened. Peter says to her, tell me whether you and your husband sold the land for such and such a price. Immediately, she unfortunately tells a lie and says, yep, that was the price. And immediately, Peter informs her that she's going to die and drop dead just like her husband. There was no question, even the father thinking to herself, maybe I should tell the truth right now. Nope. Unfortunately, she keeps up with the lie and she drops dead too. And so this verse 7 and 8 also begs the question, do we follow the same fate of our spouse? If it is in fact the case that our spouse tells a lie and drops dead, do we keep the lie going or do we pause and decide to take a different road? At some point, our sister should have thought to herself, you know what? Why is Peter asking me this question? Maybe I need to be honest and respond differently. But this thought never jumps in her mind. This thought never stands out in her mind. She keeps the lie going in some sense, never thinking to herself, let me do something different. And so the irony in this text, as we examine this Acts chapter 5 text, we come face to face with the reality that Dr. Nidra Tawab wants us to highlight. Who you are romantically connected to actually has an impact on whether or not you will fulfill your divine identity, mission, and purpose. This theme is no stranger to us. There are several other biblical stories that we could have highlighted to think about this theme. Think about Samson and Delilah and the ways in which Samson unfortunately could not fulfill his divine mission and purpose because he was romantically connected with Delilah, who cut his hair. Think about, in some sense, even the father and mother of our Christian faith, Abraham and Sarah, the ways in which they became nervous, not trusting God to deliver them an heir in the time frame that they saw fit. And they go now and involve their servant Hagar, and they create a plot to have Abraham bear a child with Hagar. And we see now the ensuing flight that will occur later with this child Isaac being born, and the ways in which now Israel and Isaac will later become warring enemies, and even first what we see now as the Israel and Palestinian conflict that exists right now. What are the ways in which we have to take a moment to do some deep reflection on asking a really tough question? We want to shift now. I want to invite you to ask a tough question of yourself. Does the person you are romantically involved with right now help you achieve your identity, mission, and purpose? That is a tough question that we have to grapple with. Does the person who we are romantically involved with right now help us achieve our life, identity, mission, and purpose? That is a tough question that we all have to do inventory of. I think about our famous civil rights leaders. I think about Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Medgar Evers. I think about the ways in which Coretta Scott King, Betty Shabazz, and Marilee Evers Williams were dedicated and faithful in supporting their husband's mission, identity, and purpose. I think about Coretta Scott King in particular and the ways in which it, ironically enough, she was so she was so invested in her husband's mission and purpose that she never even remarried. And she was so invested in her husband's mission and purpose that it was after his death, she saw to it that he would have a national holiday named in his honor. We wouldn't even celebrate King's Holiday every January 15th if it wasn't for her hard work, right? Do you have a partner, spouse, husband, wife who lives out and supports unashamedly and unapologetically your divine mission and purpose to your own death? The question that we have to grapple with. Pause there for a second. If there's any thoughts or tips from the audience.
Yeah, we don't have any responses yet. So y'all out there, put in some of your thoughts on this. You don't have to necessarily, get personal and say, no, my spouse ain't helping me. You ain't got to do that right now. That's something, you begin to think on. But your observations, one of the observations of that text for me is that what Peter told Ananias was the money was yours to do what you wanted. Mm-hmm. You could have said, okay, I sold it for this amount, but I'm only going to give this amount. It would have been cool. But he tried to act like, he was going along with everything. And he and his wife concocted this. And so if you have a spouse that is it's not a problem doing unsavory and deceitful things, it's not too long before that spouse is going to do some unsavory and deceitful things to you. I mean,
that's true. That is true. That is true. That is true. Oh, I am a living witness. Yes. Oh, you're driving down the street. You're driving down the street now.
Oh my God. Yes. So yeah, that's all I got.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Most definitely. Dr. Tewab invites us to some wonderful learning. First and foremost, she highlights for us this understanding that in order now to not impair our divine identity, mission, and purpose, we need to do inventory of our current relationship. We need to also reflect on what it's like to engage in reflecting on how to enter into a healthy romantic relationship. What is the process that must engage in to enter into a healthy romantic relationship? What are steps that I need to take to enter into a healthy romantic relationship? If I'm currently in a relationship, what are some things I need to do that foster healthiness? First and foremost, Dr. Nitra Tewab says we need to create a relationship based on agreement, explicit agreement and implicit agreement. We need to create a relationship that has particular agreement. She says, listen, let's be honest. When we enter into relationships with folks, they're not mind readers. We have to explicitly state, this is what I need. This is what's going to be helpful for me in this relationship. We have to make agreement. And we have to communicate what are things that are important to us. And so she says, for example, we might have to make an agreement. Don't raise your voice at me. Or have open relationships where we discuss other partners with each other. Or I want to meet your friends. She says in some sense, what gets us into trouble with our romantic relationships is we haven't communicated on first and foremost our needs. First and foremost, she says we have to enact a couple of important rules. Number one, we have to define for our spouse, what does it mean to be in a healthy relationship? What does it mean to be in a healthy relationship? Why are you all in a relationship with each other? Take a sheet of paper and write, what is the real reason you're in a relationship with this person? Number three, notice your energy while engaging with this particular person. Are you peaceful, joyful, powerful when you're in a romantic relationship with this person? Or are you sad, mad, and scared? Next, how do you remember you have to do what feels right for you? Next, you have to make peace with not having a relationship, with having a relationship that everybody agrees with. What does it mean to know that, everybody may not agree with who you're in relationship with? And guess what? That's okay. If the person is not hurting you, abusing you, taking advantage of you, impeding your authentic, unique, divine identity, mission, and purpose, so what if other people don't agree with who you're in a relationship with? You have to challenge societal norms about what a relationship looks like. So maybe in a patriarchal society, we have a belief that sometimes it is the gentleman that has to go to work, bring home the bacon, and the wife stays at home and cleans the house. But maybe we need to challenge that societal perspective. Maybe in tough economic times, I was reading recently a study that said women are more employable right now than men. There are more Black women who have jobs than Black men right now. Many Black men are unemployed. So what does it mean to challenge this societal stereotype that says, oh, it's the man's job to go to work and it's the woman's job to stay home? What does it mean to challenge this belief and say, no, maybe wife wants to work full time and husband stays at home, cleaning the home, cooking dinner, caring for the household, right? We have to be open to challenging societal norms about what a relationship should look like. We have to also discover, discern, reflect on what makes us happy in this relationship. Does this relationship even make you happy? If it does, what is it in particular about the relationship that makes you happy? And last but not least, we have to reflect on how do we honor our feelings in the relationship and make healthy choices as a result of those feelings. People who have healthy relationships, they discern and grapple with these particular dynamics. I'll pause there. Which one of these stands out for you? Does anyone on this list, anything on this list stand out for you?
So again, not responses yet, but I'm gonna tell you the one that says challenge societal norms about what relationships should look like.
Yeah.
And in the illustration you gave, it was 2 weeks ago. What is Oprah's friend that is, what is her? Gail. So on that morning show that Gail is on with the others, the morning news and whatnot, they actually were looking at a new paradigm because of what you said. Now, it wasn't, that Black women, it was, it was the fact that women were more employable. And so there's a movement where there were women that were employed and the men were at home, and they weren't looking for a job. They were at home doing the stuff that, traditionally the patriarchal society, the women would do at home, clean the house, take care of the kids and whatnot. And the men weren't looking for a job. They were just, doing that. And so they were talking about how this is, changing the game and blah, 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 right? Well, Gail said at the end of the segment, she said, I'm not down with that. She said, an able-bodied man that ain't looking for a job, that ain't sexy. And I ain't down with that.
And that's why Gail is single. But Gail ain't got no man. Yeah,
But the point is made that challenging the societal norms is a challenge for many male and female, because there are just some stereotypes that some women have that, you're supposed to be the breadwinner, even though if y'all can make this thing happen, then make it happen, regardless of what the point is of what other people think. Ooh.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Most definitely. Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Kathleen says challenging societal norms has been real in our family. She said it has worked out well and the demonstration of love between them is palpable. It does not matter who the breadwinner is. Love is it. Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Most definitely. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you. Dr. Nitra Tewab says we also have to consider, in addition to making relationship agreement, we have to also be clear about communication. And how do we have healthy communication about our expectations? She explains to us that poor communication is the leading cause of divorce and breakup. And so we have to have certain conversations about particular hot topics. She says there are 5 hot topics that we need to communicate about. And if we don't communicate about these topics, our relationship will not survive. First and foremost, she says we need to have a tough conversation about fidelity. How do you have conversations with your spouse around fidelity? And there are 4 important questions you have to begin to ask and reflect on. Number 1, is your relationship going to be monogamous? Is your relationship going to be monogamous? What does monogamy mean? What does cheating look like? What's the consequences if someone cheats? Finances. How will you manage your money in the relationship? Who is responsible for paying which bill? What are your short-term and long-term financial goals? Will you have a joint or separate bank and brokerage account? Do either or both of you have financial issues? How will you address financial issues when they arise? Household. Who is responsible for doing which task? How will tasks be divided so that they don't fall on one person? How can you work together to meet the needs of your home? Kids. Do you want kids? How many kids do you want? What is your parenting style? What do you think it'll be? How will you approach disagreements related to kids? How will you maintain your relationship with your spouse once children arrive? Outside forces. How do you handle issues with your partner's family? What happens when you disagree with your partner? What happens when you disagree with how your partner handled a situation? Is it okay to talk about your relationship with people outside the relationship? If so, who? How do you protect your relationship from others? Dr. K-Wap says these are the conversations that is so important to have with your spouse. When you don't have these conversations with your spouse, the
Can I add?
relationship won't survive. Oh, yes, yes, please,
Yeah,
please.
I want to add one. Dr. Tell you what, missed one, and it is sex.
Ah,
When I do premarital counseling, these are discussions, these questions that we bring up, that especially the finances and et cetera, and the communication. But I also add in there sex because, again, when people don't talk about what they want, then they end up, being frustrated, and then it comes up in a blow up. And so I mean, I get pretty detailed. I have a list that I have them, fill out. It ain't no judgment. I have them fill out, what do you like? How do you like your sex? You know, and they check those things off. What's comfortable for you? And so, because again, just like everything else, if you don't talk about it, then you end up getting frustrated, and then you lash out and say, oh, well, I couldn't read your mind. I didn't know that. So
well, or you end up going out cheating and having an affair. Because
yeah,
they're like, hey, you didn't want to
exactly.
do this? You didn't want to do this? No.
That's real talk. That's real
Most
talk.
definitely. Most definitely. Most
Yeah. And there's another one, I asked him, I said, now, have you been married before? And sometimes they'll say, yeah. I said, do you have the divorce papers? Why? Because this is true story. At Trinity, Chicago, went through a premarital program. They went through, well, they didn't, it wasn't a premarital program at the end. They went through some premarital counseling. The guy had been married before, and they get this wedding day, and there's a person in the thing that says he can't be married today. We still married. And the brother, they had been, gone so long, away from one another, years, many years. He just thought, for some reason, he just said, I just thought I got divorced. And she was there, wrecked the whole thing. So I asked people, you got them divorce papers? Because you don't want to get on wedding day and somebody say, hold up. Don't say no vows yet.
wow.
So yeah. Jeanette says, I'm old school. I agree with, if a man don't work, he can't eat.
Oh,
Okay.
we got to do something different. We got to do something different in 2023. We got to do something different in 2023.
Oh yeah.
That's, I think that this conversation brings up other thoughts around. Do we know other people's gifts and skills if we limit people to box, right? Do we know people's gifts and skills if we limit them to boxes? If I can be vulnerable and if I can be vulnerable and transparent, and if it's a disgusting story, then I apologize in advance. I was 12 years old when I was at home with my stepfather. This is the gentleman that I acknowledge as my father. He is my stepfather, and the reason I want to emphasize that is for the point of this story. My mom had went out shopping with my aunt one Saturday, and I was at home, and I went to use the washroom, and my stomach started cramping, profusely. The next thing I know, I noticed when I got up from using the washroom, I noticed that I was bleeding. I got scared. I thought I had broke something in my body. I said, oh my gosh, I done did something wrong. I was 12 years old. And I yelled out to my father. I said, Dad, I said, something is not right. I was in the washroom with the door closed. He knocks on the door. He turns around backwards and walks into the washroom backwards so he doesn't see me sitting down half naked on the toilet. He says, explain to me what's wrong. And I said, I'm bleeding. There's blood in the toilet and there's blood running down my legs and it's all in my underwear. I think I need to go to the hospital. And he looks at me and he says, daughter, you have caught the menstruation cycle. He says, stay there for a moment. Don't get up. My father got up, put his shoes on, grabbed his car keys, went to the grocery store nearby, got sanitary napkins for me, came back into the house, went to the basement and got a washing board, came back into the washroom again, standing backward, and literally takes out of this bag from Jewel grocery store a sanitary napkin, and again, standing backward, he holds up this maxi pad and says, okay, this is what you do. This is the way you put it on. This is how you open the package. This is how you put it on yourself. Standing backward, he teaches me this. After I put on this pad, I clean myself up, I wash my hands. Watch my father then say, okay, let me give you a fresh pair of underwear. He goes into my bedroom, gets me a fresh pair of underwear, says, put this on. Again, walking backwards into the bathroom. And after I clean myself up, put on a fresh pair of clothes, I watched my father run the water in the bathtub, get down on his hands and knees, scrub my underwear that I had unfortunately bled on. He scrubbed my underwear with a washing board and then proceeds to then dry my underwear. And that story has always stayed with me because whenever someone asked me, hey, whenever I heard stories of, oh, it's the woman, it's the mom that's supposed to work with the daughter, teaching them what to do when they catch their menstruation cycle, I always say to people, no, it was not my mom who taught me that. That was my father. That was my father who taught me this, who taught me how to wear a maxi pad. That was my father who, ever since that point, from the time I was 12 years old to the time I moved out of my parents' home at 17, every month I watched my father. Every month, whenever I would catch my cycle, he would get down on his hands and knees once a month and scrub my underwear every month from the time I was 12 to the time I was 17 years old, right? And so I also think we have to be careful. We have, I'm sorry if it was too morbid, but I'm just saying we have to be careful about stereotypes of roles and all of that, because you never know what somebody is gifted in that goes against societal roles and norms. I pause there for a second.
Well, I really want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that, because that is extremely powerful and instructive to help not only us, but and those of you who are in the chat, please share this with others, because it goes to what Nidra is saying, to communicate. You have to communicate what your needs are, what your desires are, how you feel, how your perspective is. You have to communicate, because we get into relationships and we talk about falling in love and then everything gonna work out. That is hogwash. You cannot work it out just falling in love. You have to talk through this, and you have to do this. You have to do this up front. And then the other thing is that there is a lot of other stories than the stereotypes that we are used to. It's just like, I hate when people say, a single black woman can't raise a black boy. That's not true. That's just not true. It's been done. Black women are doing it. No, they shouldn't have to do it by themselves, but it's been done. And so, we need to stop that, because that hurts people, first of all, that are in a situation, and not of their own accord. And they just got to do what they got to do. It's just like a black man can raise a daughter, it's done. I see it all the time. So, we have to, we gotta be open enough to communicate. And however it is you are oriented and feel about these relationship stuff, communicate that with the person you're in relationship with, so that y'all on the same page, and that this person understands, and you understand them. And guess what? Things go a lot smoother. Maybe sometimes you won't be in a relationship because that person recognizes, look, no, I can't do that. That ain't me. Well, that's good that we know this now, because the better we know this now, then we get into the thing and get ugly, because it's gonna get ugly once you get into the relationship and get married and all that. So thank you for sharing that.
You're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last but not least, as we get ready to close, there's an exercise that Dr. Tawab invites us to reflect on. Number one, if you're single, ask yourself, what are my top 5 needs in a relationship? When will I communicate my boundaries? How will I naturally communicate them? What issues will be hardest for me to set boundaries for? How will I have a potential partner to receive my boundaries? If you're in a relationship, she says we have to ask ourselves, what are my top 5 needs in my relationship? Is my partner aware of my needs? What is the biggest issue in my relationship? Have I set any boundaries with my partner? Am I honoring the boundaries I set with my partner? In what new ways can I share my boundaries with my partner? These questions become so important for us to grapple with. These questions become so important for us to grapple with. And we cannot make, as our pastor says, we cannot make any assumptions about these questions. We have to really, 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 really work hard to be courageous enough to ask these questions in some sense. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
family, for joining us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jeanette says single parenting from the male or female outlook is a lot different from our parents. That is true. The issue of blended families are so real today. It's become a part of the landscape. But this is
Most definitely.
yeah, this has been extremely helpful. Thank you all once again for joining in. Kathleen, Dr. Buhuro has sent me the little flyers, and so I will get them to you for the newsletter and all that good stuff. And again, share this session. Just hit the share button and share it and tell others about it. And we'll see you all, on next Tuesday. Thank you, Dr. Buhuro.
Thank you. We're going to be talking about careers.
Careers?
Does the career you have really support your divine identity?
Oh my goodness.
Does the job you have support your divine identity?
Oh my goodness. It's getting real hot.
Oh yeah. I'm convicted already. Oh